Okay, so next up, let's have a look at risk assessment. So the point of risk assessment is basically to provide decision makers with enough information, including including possible alternatives, so that a good decision, intelligent decision, informed decisions can be made. So give you a second here to go pause this and go watch the Student's Guide to Risk Assessment. Okay. So, bit of an overview of the process. So again, we just talked about hazards. So hazards are something that has potential to cause injuries or occupational illness or damage. So risk is basically kind of assessment of that injury or loss by taking a combination of how likely it is to occur and how bad it will be if it occurs. So, and assessing likelihood versus the effects on health, property, environment, other things, value, so on and so forth. So risk management is basically trying to put together a system that we can use to evaluate those hazards, how likely they are to occur, how bad it will be if it does occur, and so on and so forth. So we want to reduce the uncertainty of our processes by trying to trying to evaluate what risks there are and mitigate them as needed. So yeah, in general, we're basically taking probability times consequences. So yeah, the higher, the more likely a bad thing is to occur, the higher the risk. The worse it is if it occurs, the higher the risk. And obviously, when you combine those two things, then it gets even worse. So yeah, probability, and fairly self-explanatory. The probability, the likelihood of the hazardous occurrence happening, and you figure this out by analyzing the conditions and factors associated with that particular hazard. So things that might come into play is how many employees do you have exposed? How often and how long is the exposure of the hazard? What is the nature and what is the degree of the exposure? What sort of distance do you have between your employees and the danger? How well are people trained? How well are they supervised? What type of equipment is used? How good is the workstation design? So on and so forth. Consequences. So we're measuring the impact upon the workplace, the organization, the employee, so on and so forth. So if someone gets injured, that is a severe consequence. If a production line needs to be shut down for an hour, that is also a severe consequence. There's different impacts that can occur. If a fire breaks out, then and that's gonna reduce your ability to do whatever you would have been doing otherwise. It's also going to cause damage to the equipment, and you might hurt some people in the process. So fairly severe fairly severe consequence there. So consequences can be to workers' health. There may be legislation that you're required to comply with that if this thing occurs, you wouldn't be in compliance with. You may lose, you may lose some of your product that you're making. You may, some of the material that you're working with may be wasted. You may have an operational impact. So, from a forces perspective, if your main air search radar goes down, then that is an operational impact. And if you're in the middle of a theater where there's an air threat, then guess what? You're going to want to be able to fix that. Or from a more generalized engineering perspective, if a piece of equipment that you are relying upon to do the job, whether it's to make cars or drill for oil or what have you, if that goes down, then the impact isn't just limited to the cost of replacing or repairing that material. You're also impacted with the opportunity cost of the products that you would have made in the meantime while that thing's down. Public's perception comes into play. We in the forces we don't want to be seeing reports on CBC about how all our ships are falling apart, and obviously we can't do our jobs properly, and so on and so forth. And then we got legal action. So if someone is injured, or if someone's property is damaged as a result of this hazard occurring, then you might be sued as a result. So you might be sued, or there might be a criminal liability as well, depending upon how severe the impact was. So we need to control our risk by identifying the hazards, evaluating the risk associated with it, and then deciding to do something about it. So we need to implement control measures. So preventative measures, again, we want to be eliminating our hazard first, reducing the severity of the hazard, and then adding stuff like PPE and so on and so forth. So there's a guide to risk assessment available on the DWAN, but the steps basically want to be listing all the possible incidences that could occur that you can think of for whatever it is that you're trying to do. And then you consider the consequences. So, and then we rate them basically. So if someone would die, then that would be catastrophic. If someone would be permanently disabled, that would be critical. Temporary disability, significant. And if someone needs to go to the doctor, that could be 2. And if someone might need first aid, but may not necessarily need a hospital visit. If they need, or if no actual treatment's required, then that might be a negligible consequence. And then legislative compliance comes into play here. So, we may be not compliant at all if this thing occurs. We might be not compliant until the situation's controlled. Maybe non-compliant for a short time, so on and so forth. Unit material losses. How much stuff gets ruined as a result of this. Our operational impact. Are we going to be delayed for a month? Are we going to be delayed for an hour? Is it going to have no impact, no real impact on our operations? The public perception. Are the only people who find out about this thing occurring going to be internal to the organization, or are we going to fail the Globe and Mail test, or are we going to fail the CNN test? Definitely don't want to be doing that. And then we go with the likelihood. So, is this thing likely to occur? Do we expect it to happen at least once every month? Or do we expect it to happen once every 6 months? Once every year? Once every 3 years? Or just, do we really doubt this thing's going to happen at all? Next, we want to figure out how likely we are to detect the fault before it causes a problem. So, is your check engine light going to go on before your engine explodes? Do you have a routine maintenance procedure where you're inspecting critical parts for crack growth or what have you? How likely are you to find the problem before failure occurs, before it gets to the point where the consequence occurs? So then we basically go ahead and calculate the risks by taking the consequences rating and the likelihood rating and the detection rating and multiplying them together. For this particular chart, they just kind of assumed that the detection rating was 5, so not likely to be able to figure it out at all. But if you have something that you expect to occur frequently and it will have a catastrophic effect, and you have no chance of detecting it, then we rate 5 times 5 is 125. Whereas if it's a negligible consequence and it's not very likely to happen, but it's also you're not be able to detect it, then it's a rating of 5 basically. So yeah, so if you have something that's going to happen a lot and would have catastrophic consequences, and you're not likely to catch it, then obviously you need to do something about that. Because we can't just go killing people off every month or so because of this hazard that we don't bother fixing. So the assessment legend, if we're in the red here, then basically what we're saying is that these activities can't proceed until you do something about it. So you need to eliminate that risk, and if not possible, control the risk in a manner that reduces the level of risk to something lower. So you might be able to put in engineering controls that reduce or eliminate the hazard. You might put in administrative controls that will allow you to do the job safely if followed properly, and so on and so forth. If it's in the orange there, you may need to basically do the above within a certain time frame. Maybe not immediately, but you need to do it. And then yellow, acceptable with monitoring. So we want to be doing reasonable, cost-effective measures to reduce that risk. But at the level it's at, maybe it's not critical, so we don't necessarily need to stop work because of it. And then, of course, if we're in the green here, no further action required. Green's good to go. We obviously want to monitor and control the situation to ensure that we're still within the green, because if the situation changes, then obviously the assumptions that were made previous may no longer be valid. But here's an example scenario. So if you want to change your own car brakes, you want to save a bit of coin because you're a poor ELOF and you don't get paid much, although I was a DEO and I didn't get paid at all when I was at school, so quit whining. But anyways, but you're not a licensed mechanic. You got limited experience working on cars, but you still want to save a bit of money. Changing your brake pads and rotors. So you want to look at certain possible incidences that could occur. Maybe you're going to install the new brakes incorrectly. Maybe you're going to forget something when you reinstall stuff. Maybe you're going to buy the wrong parts, and when you go to put them on, well, it doesn't work. You might injure yourself. You might damage the car. So we want to assess these. So the new brakes installed incorrectly. That would have a catastrophic consequence. And since you're not very good at this, it's occasional. It's reasonably likely that might occur. Same deal with a part forgotten during reinstallation. You're going to purchase the wrong parts. That could have a critical consequence. Maybe not as likely as inexperience leading to you installing them properly. Causing injury to yourself, maybe not all that likely, but at least you're probably not going to injure yourself terribly. So minimal here is probably the way to go. You might send yourself. You might in the process, cut yourself. Maybe require a trip to the doctor. Maybe a trip to the ER. But you're not likely to in the process of installing it, get yourself killed. But given your inexperience, it's reasonably probable that could occur. And then you might inadvertently damage the car, occasionally do so. So we take all this, add it up, and again, here we're kind of assuming that the detection ratings, the maximum. So it's kind of it was for this analysis it was neglected. So what we want to do is, we add those up, realize, all right, we're a bit higher than we want to be here. So what we can do is we can think up ways to go about to mitigate those risks. So, for example, in order to mitigate the risk of new brakes being installed incorrectly, what you could do is you could watch some YouTube videos, pay very close attention to what the maintenance manual says. You can follow, you can do steps to kind of train yourself how to do these. You can get some advice from some friends of yours who might have a bit more experience in these areas, so on and so forth. So those are steps that can be taken to decrease the likelihood of the consequence. Will probably be the way that they'll go. The kind of method that would be most used here. And in some instances, we could decrease the consequence. So, if the wrong parts would be purchased, you could mitigate that by, again, consulting the owner's manual so the maintenance manual to ensure you're getting the right part numbers. But, you might second guess yourself. Maybe just purchase it from a place that allows you to return them easily. That could reduce the consequence. You're not going to be out any cash, as long as you kind of double check that everything works. As you before you break open the containers, the packaging and so on and so forth, you should be good to go. So the module test is a hazard and risk assessment scenario for cleaning and painting a plane on a pedestal. So you will find that in that link in the Moodle. And yeah, that's finish that off, submit it, and you will be done this portion of your GEE 291 course. Beyond that, have a nice summer, guys.